Hey guys, it's Cassie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I wanted to take you guys along my creative process on how I made this cowgirl inspired corset top. Like my previous corset top tutorial, I will be linking the pattern I created down below. This one is for a size 0 to 2. If you're wanting to drape your own pattern on your own dress form like I am, you're going to start off by taking some thin strips of tape and taping your design onto your dress form. And you're just going to play around with it until you're happy with the design or the shape you come up with. Once you complete your design, you're going to get some fabric. A lot of people use muslin fabric, but I like to use scrap fabric or clothes that I never use anymore. In this case, I'm using a tank top, and you're going to trace out your shapes onto the fabric and cut it out. Make sure you pin it so that the fabric lies flat, or else if it's bumpy, you're just not going to get the correct shape, and then your corset top is not going to fit you properly. Once I finish tracing out a shape, I like to label it just so I don't get confused with which pieces go where. Repeat your pin and trace process for all of your shapes until you've completed the whole design. Now that we're done tracing out all our shapes, it's time to cut it out. So all you're going to do is grab some scissors and cut on the lines that you drew. And don't worry, we're going to draw in our seam allowance on paper once we're done with this step. Now that I'm done cutting out all my pieces, this is what my pattern should look like so far. Now it's time to finalize the pattern. I'm going to grab some paper, a ruler, scissors, and a pencil. I'm going to take the pattern pieces that I just cut out and place them onto the paper, and I'm going to start tracing around the shape. Then I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to start creating a seam allowance of 1/2 inch. This is going to be for the boning. You'll see later on in the video. I'm going to take my rulers and I'm going to use them to fine tune the edges and the curves. If you just so happen to be my size, I linked the pattern that I created in the description down below. It's free for you guys to use. Again, I just created it very quickly, so it may not be perfect. For size reference, I'm around a size 0 to 2. Now that the pieces are cut out and complete, we're going to cut out our pieces onto fabric. So you're going to follow the instructions that are on the front of the pattern pieces. I cut out 2 of each one for the shell and 2 of each one for the lining. This is how your pieces should look all cut out. Now it's time to pin the pieces together. You're going to grab your pieces, good sides touching, and you're going to pin along the edge. Then you're going to sew where the pins are, making sure you leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance. here's what the shell and the lining of my corset top looks like. Now for the most satisfying part, in my opinion, is ironing down the seams. So I'm gonna iron down all of my seams to one side except for the middle one. The middle one, I'm gonna iron it down straight through the middle, and I'll show you what that looks like later. This is what the seam should look like when they're all ironed. As you can see, the middle seam is open straight down the middle, kind of like a hot dog, and the other seams are just lying flat to one side. Now I'm just going to repeat my ironing process onto the shell of my corset top. Now that all the seams are laying flat, we're going to create our boning channels. Make sure you pick a colored thread that matches the color of your corset top because these seams are going to be exposed. The way that I do my boning channels, I only do it on either the lining or the shell, so I chose to do it on the lining. Now on to sewing. You're going to take your seams and you're going to sew along the edge, creating a tunnel or a tube. Make sure you're not sewing too close to the edge or else your boning might poke through your seam and make a hole. Repeat this step on all your seams. This is how my lining looks like with all of the completed boning channels. Because I got itty bitty titties, I knew that I wanted my corset top to have straps, but because I hate making straps because it's such a tedious process for me, I got a belt that someone donated to me and I started cutting it and just making it work as my straps. This is how I did it. I cut the belt in half, and then on the edge of the strap that's going to be showing, I cut it out in more of a rounded shape, and then I tried filing it, which didn't really work, and then my mind was like, burn it. So I started burning the edge just so it wouldn't fray, and it actually worked. Because only one side of the belt had holes, for obvious reasons, I needed to replicate the holes onto the other side of the belt, so the other strap. So what I did was I laid one half of the belt on top of the other half, and I started drawing in where the circles would go, and luckily a year ago I impulsively bought a leather hole puncher, so I used my leather hole puncher and just started punching holes into my belt to create my strap. Now it's time to put everything together and make our corset top actually start looking like a corset top. I got my shell fabric and my lining fabric to lay on top of each other, good sides touching, and then I shimmied my strap in between them, and I like to make sure that my strap is poking out a little bit just so I don't mess up with the sewing and not sew my strap in the right place. I also made sure that the good side of my belt was facing the good side of my outside fabric. Last but not least, I added buckles from an old backpack to connect the straps to the back of the corset top. This is what my corset top looks like, all pinned up. I pinned up all of the edges except for the bottom edge. That we're gonna leave open. You probably guessed it, now we're gonna sew where the pins are. Again, I sewed with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Because the belt I used for the straps was made out of a genuine leather, I switched my needle to a leather needle just so that it wouldn't break, but my thread kept breaking, so that was quite unfortunate. We're almost done, guys. The corset top is all sewn up. We got our boning channels, the straps are in. So now what we're gonna do before we flip everything inside out is we're gonna cut little slits around the edges and the corners just so everything lays flat and beautiful and so that there's no bulking. Make sure you don't cut the seams though, or else you're gonna make a hole and it's just so annoying to sew it back up. Once you're done that, let's flip everything inside out. You're gonna wanna take a little pokey tool thing. You can even use a pencil to just poke your corners through a little bit so that they look really crisp and neat and pointy. Once everything is flipped inside out, you're gonna lay it flat and we're gonna top stitch the edges just so that nothing moves around and so that it looks professional. Usually I'd iron down the edge to make it even more flat and easier to sew, but my outside fabric, weirdly enough, was kind of like a styrofoamy material and it really didn't like the heat, so I pinned it instead. Grab some boning and measure it out to the length of your boning channels. Make sure it doesn't go all the way to the bottom because you don't want to sew over the plastic. We're going to be adding a binding to the bottom edge of the corset top anyways, so again, just make sure it doesn't go all the way from the top to the bottom. Leave about a ½ inch at the bottom for some space. Now we're going to finish off the bottom of the corset top. Measure from the edge all the way to the middle. Mine ended up being around 17 inches, but I added an extra inch or so just in case. I cut out 2 rectangles of the brown fabric and they were 17 by 2 inches. I started pinning them good sides touching along the edge of the corset top, making sure to leave a little bit of extra fabric on both edges. After I sewed it in place, I flipped the fabric over and I folded the edges inwards. Then I folded the fabric over and over again to create a clean edge. Then I grabbed some pins and pinned it all in place. Now we're going to sew everything into place. You want to try to get as close to the edge as possible, grabbing both the front and the back of the binding. Don't rush this step, it can be a little tricky, just take your time. Once you complete one side, you're going to repeat all of these steps onto the other side. Now I grabbed my eyelets and grommets and placed them in the spots I wanted them, and I used a washable marker to mark where I'm going to make the holes. I used a seam ripper and tiny scissors to make the holes for the eyelets and grommets. Make sure not to make them too big or else your eyelets are just going to fall right through. Now I'm going to get my grommet tools. You can get them if you buy a pack of eyelets and grommets from any fabric store. Then you grab a hammer and you just hammer them in. The amounts of times that I hammered on top of my fingers, oh, I bruised my fingers so badly. Be careful. Once all your eyelets and grommets are in, your corset top should be complete. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of this video. I have a bunch of other tutorials on my YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and check those out if you want to see more. If you want to stay up to date with all of my creations, you can go ahead and give me a follow on my social media handles, my Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they're all linked down below. My TikTok in particular has a bunch of mini tutorials that are under a minute, so I would highly recommend you go check those out. If you do end up making this corset top or are inspired to make something that's kind of a spin-off of this one, please tag me on Instagram or TikTok. I love seeing your guys' creations. Let me know what you guys think of my cowgirl inspired corset top down below in the comments. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on another one of my videos. Bye guys!